Мы начинаем нашу программу «Джаз фантазии. 10 лет нашего джаз-оркестра».
In the mid-1920s, Alexander Rodchenko, one of the leading exponents of the Russian avant-garde, announced in Moscow he would no longer paint and would now concentrate on photography as a means of searching for a new visual language which could best express the new visual culture emerging at that time. It was a search on which later Rodchenko reflected, "When I began to work with photography and left the world of painting behind, I didn't then realize that painting had laid on photography such a heavy hand. I came to photography not as an unknown, but as a future master of painting, graphics, and the decorative arts. I want to analyze my creative work through photography. I want so that it will be understood and believed that this path is not easy as some like to think. Before us is a new struggle. Pure photography versus applied photography. Artistic photography versus photoreportage. The world of Rodchenko's art from 1917 until 1920 was a world of geometrical composition which he subjected to its laws, formulas and structure. The concept of black on black began a process which was the beginning of Rodchenko's exit from painting. He began to use lines as a foundation of form in art. In 1918, he undertook a cycle of compositions of circular colored forms, called concentrated color. Some compositions were based on color, but arranged spatially. Finally, in 1921, Rodchenko bid his farewell to painting with a set of 3 separate canvases, red, yellow and blue, each one painted only with one color and hung side by side. Many considered it a joke or a prank to make a fool out of the critics and public, but the intent was serious and thought out. It was a declaration of intent. The era of painting was over, and a new era was about to begin. Rodchenko's experience convinced him that there existed universal systems or outlines which should not be hidden or submerged in a piece of work, but rather the other way round. They should be revealed and emphasized by an artist. But the new era in art required new forms of seeing with its own visual language. It would seem that only the camera is in a position to reflect contemporary life. This new language, difficult to call it a technique, Rodchenko described as perspectives. To be able to photograph means to create a picture which produces the maximum visual effect. In Soviet photography of the 1920s, it is understood that perspectives was connected with a certain conception, namely the point of view from the top downwards. and from below upwards. Rodchenko was accused of bourgeois influence and slavishly following the trends of France and Germany. He tried to explain that his photographs were closely connected with the experimental paintings of the early part of the century, and that the new paintings and new photography belonged to the same visual culture. The era of the genius is passing. Now we need workers and not geniuses. Machines of all kinds are being constructed in every country, with little difference between them. They are perfected and improved all the time in one factory or another. The same is happening with cars, cameras, and so on. There will never be ideal aeroplanes or cars. Therefore, comrade photographers, don't simply think about uniqueness and masterpieces. In technical imitation and modernization is one of the roads of development. This road is in art. We are going through a stage in art which I consider important for leading art out onto the road of conceiving and initiating industry. But what does one need to imitate? I often write that one must imitate images. Not blindly, of course, but consciously imitate. Set up exhibitions to argue, to explain, and fight for imitation. Don't be afraid to be guilty of imitation. I remember one student with whom I studied. One of the professors shouted at him for imitating Gauguin. The student answered, "When I imitate you, you will say that I have an original and new talent. But you yourself have imitated thousands and thousands of artists, but have lost and no longer understand or remember who you imitated. And so everything remains in a mist for you. No, I will continue to copy Gauguin. He imitated Titian, and so for me everything is clear." Culture cannot move or progress otherwise, except through the exchange and assimilation of experiences and movement. To me, it's not important how any person says A. What is important is that A is widened and used to such an end that one is able to go on to say B. Paint the truth. Value all that is real and contemporary, and we will be real people, not actors.